First and foremost, it's a top-tier hazard for us. It is embedded within our DNA, and every risk, matrix that we have, every risk register that we have, allergens sits somewhere near the top because it can really and sincerely cause a problem for our customers, and that's obviously a problem for us. And we know that the number one control for management is information, and that's the business we're in. And so we have to treat it so seriously.
You're listening to Food Tech Talk, Supply Chain Insights from Farm to Fork, a podcast discussing the latest trends and technologies in the food and supplements industries, brought to you by Trustwell, featuring conversations with regulatory experts, quality and safety champions, and thought leaders across the industry. I'm your host, Lydia Adams, VP of Marketing at Trustwell. If you're loving the conversation, don't forget to subscribe and stay tuned to the end of the episode where you'll hear our guests tell us their key food industry predictions for 2025. All right, let's jump right in. Welcome to today's episode of Food Tech Talk, Supply Chain Insights from Farm to Fork. Today, we're delighted to welcome Stephen Ross-Glass, a chartered environmental health practitioner and global food and product safety director at JustEatTakeaway.com. With extensive experience in food safety, health, and sustainability, Stephen has played a pivotal role in shaping safety protocols for the e-commerce food industry. His leadership has guided innovation strategies from allergen management to data integrity and addressing emergent risks in the fast-paced world of food delivery. Welcome to the show, Stephen.
Thank you, Lydia. I'm really pleased to be here, and thank you for inviting me on.
Stephen, can you take us back to the start of your journey into food safety and really what led you to your current role at JustEatTakeaway.com?
Sure, yes. So I started as an environmental health officer, so a food and hygiene inspector. I'm from Scotland, and you can probably tell that from my accent. And I worked really for the first 10 years of my career in government. So I worked in local government in Scotland, where I'm from, but also in London and elsewhere in the UK, really. And there I gained knowledge of really investing in customers and responding to exactly what customers want rather than what businesses want, because we were non-profit as by definition, really. So as much as it gets a bad reputation, sometimes there are some genuinely excellent people in local authorities and in national governments, and that's really where I learned to do what I do, really. And yeah, as I said, it's full of tremendous, dedicated people, but it's a slow-moving organization by design, and as a result, I moved to the private sector. Since then, for the past 15 years, I've been working across the food industry, really. So, firstly for catering companies, then moved into business and industry, then for groups of companies, and most recently, in 2020 onwards, I moved into the tech world and started working for Just Eat, which became JustEatTakeaway.com through a series of mergers and acquisitions. And I've brought with me into that current position the customer focus that's always been a core part of what I've done, truly answering people's problems, but also something that really you only pick up in hospitality, I think, is how to make money and how to make the pennies and cents count, really. So it's an odd balance, but making compliance and making safety commercially viable really has been my USP and something I've brought into the tech world with Just Eat.
So in terms of like the global scale of what you've done in the past, how has your background in compliance sustainability really influenced your approach to food safety?
There's two principles to it, I would say: negotiation and partnership, really. So I've been exposed to those two different environments. In government agencies, you're taught that the law is paramount and that everyone should comply. And in business, well, you obviously comply with the law. You do anything to get a competitive edge. So what I've tried to do is to make sure that compliance is that competitive advantage. And this means things like, one, making sure that any company I've worked in aims for net zero emissions. Not currently my responsibility at Jet, but certainly something I've contributed to. And number two, making sure that, for example, in the company I work for right now, that we employ our couriers' contracts and employment status in comparison to our competitors. And three, that, we do things like completely own our self-labeled products and how we make sure that those are compliant. And that's rare in the tech world. And all of these things, when they're combined, become selling points. And if you can convince your sales teams, and this is where the partnership piece comes in, of their value, then the rest becomes easy, really. And moving those principles and those basics up into a global scale is really just about scaling.
Yeah, no, I hear that. And in terms of data integrity, that also seems like it's, a big order to go on a global scale. So, what role does technology play for you guys there at just eattakeaway.com in terms of maintaining accuracy and transparency with a global food safety operation? How confident are you in your supply chain? If the answer is anything less than 100%, you might want to sign up for our free webinar, A Fresh Take on Traceability from Trustwell. We'll be featuring Del Monte. It's happening March 27th, and we're breaking down everything that you need to know about traceability, including what's changing and what actually works. Plus, we'll talk about how to keep your business ahead of the game. So don't wait. Grab your spot now. The link is in the show notes. Or you can visit trustwell.com to find out more. All right, back to the show.
Yeah, absolutely, and that gets to the crux of really why we're talking, and really why we're so embedded as a sort of traditional compliance team within a tech business. And the role that technology plays for us is huge. I couldn't understate it, and working for a tech business, I certainly won't understate it. But we've got traditional lag indicators and various other tools that we use that are inherent throughout the food industry, certainly at the cutting edge of it. It's things like integration with data banks, and making sure that we have consistency in our data through those data banks and how we use them. But we go one step beyond that, and we use our own data banks, our own machine learning processes and large language models to really fill in the gaps of what data banks can't provide. And in my business specifically, that means restaurant food. So the food that mom and pop stores are making that may change day to day, the integrity of the data that has to accompany that food legally is sometimes questionable. And it's a big leap and a big ask to ask all of those businesses to update maybe 3 or 4 aggregator websites every single day with new fresh data. So if we can innovate in integration solutions, and also if we can innovate in AI, then we can fill those gaps in for them, with safety nets, of course, but making sure that that data is there in the first instance and is really sanctified is where we best use technology. And we also, I mentioned the lag stuff. We also have lead stuff as well. We do what we call AI policing, which is essentially to see whether we can, with a sheer volume of data that's coming through our platforms globally, whether we can spot things like food fraud, like hazards, before they happen. We've got, in many cases, far more data points than regulators would have, and if we can get ahead of that, and we have on a number of occasions, then it really demonstrates the benefit of technology in an integrated food business.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned AI. We we do a lot of polls in the industry here at Trustwell, and a lot of folks are kind of in that mode of if they want to implement AI tools and they don't really know how or where to begin. And so, what kind of challenges did you guys have to overcome to really implement that into your business model?
Finding space, really, not many, I should say, because we, again, being a big tech business, we have got engineers, architects, all at our core, all of whom want to use AI in the best possible way. So the hurdle for us is probably slightly different to a standard food business, in that we had to find the bandwidth within that resource to make sure that we could get our voice heard, and that our reasons for using AI, such as filling in gaps in menus, filling in gaps in nutrition cards, that took precedence over various other uses for it, such as photography and so on. So personally, the barrier we found is making sure we're heard and using it. But looking at it from an industry perspective, really the barrier is about understanding what it can do for you and truly harnessing that potential, really. And we're all a bit jaded when it comes to the next big thing in tech. Everyone's talked about AI for a while. Before that, it was NFTs. Before that, it was blockchain. Everybody thinks the next thing is going to innovate entirely, but what we have to understand is it's a natural progression, and when these things and tools become available to us to make our jobs easier, but also our customers safer, then we should use them. So yeah, getting over that adoption hurdle is probably the industry's biggest issue.
Yeah, definitely. So let's talk about allergen labeling. I think it's one of the most important topics globally, really. So how does your organization work with your restaurant partners to ensure that there are clear and accurate labels of allergens on, on the food that they sell?
First and foremost, it's a top tier hazard for us, and it is embedded within our DNA and in every risk matrix that we have, every risk register that we have. Allergens sits somewhere near the top, because it can really and sincerely cause a problem for our customers, and that's obviously a problem for us. And we know that the number one control for allergen management is information, and that's the business we're in. So we have to treat it so seriously. And to answer your question directly, we've got several different methods on how we ensure it, and it really depends on the part of the world that we're in. So we go from the sort of gold suite, which is full integration with our partners, and we use this for strategic partners, big restaurant groups, for example, who publish and control rigorously their supply chain and their information, and we really just take that and duplicate it on our platforms. The real risk comes when you move down that hierarchy and we look at the small, medium businesses, the mom and pop stores, and that's where we have various different methods, all the way from allergen prediction, which is kind of what I talked about in the last answer, where we will provide the information for them based on data that they've provided us, be it the name of the food, the recipe for the food. We'll publish that for them, or suggest it and they publish it, rather. And then at the sort of, not bottom of the hierarchy, but probably the most common thing that we have is restaurant self-service, where we give the restaurant full control to publish what they have. And that sounds like a winner for us in terms of liability, but we are not really in the business of reducing our liability. We're in the business of making sure that our customers are safe. And as a result, we want to steer away from that in the main, because we know that if we use AI, if we use all the tools that we have, data banks, then we get a much clearer picture for the restaurants. So we kind of want to curate it for our restaurants. That's the guiding principle, but really we've got those three approaches: integration, prediction, and self-service.
Yeah. No, I mean, it sounds like you guys have a very complex system in order to address all of that. And, you mentioned depending on where you are, like how does that change globally when depending on which country that you're working within?
Well, yeah, it's a really good question. So the straightforward answer is, obviously legislation changes country upon country. How we operate is, I would say, no different to any other global company. We like to go with, best standard, and we will deviate from that only when we have clear instruction from a national regulator or an overwhelming commercial reason not to, that obviously stays within legal parameters. Using examples, we've got the European model wherein we've got 14 identified allergens across the EU and various other adjacent states. And we use more or less the same approach. There are some nuances. There are some countries in which the regulator insists that we give direct access to the restaurant partner. We will do that, of course. And then there are other countries in which the the advice from government is almost the opposite, that they want us to provide nothing but written information. So it is a minefield negotiating that. But it's a challenge that everyone in any global business that works in compliance has. And our fundamental principle of getting a gold standard that we replicate across our business and across our regions, and slight deviations only where necessary, tends to help. But it still takes up a lot of our time.
So, I feel like the allergen conversation, it's obviously probably the most important, but it lends itself to just consumer demand for transparency. People want to know what's in their food. How do you guys address that, and how are you seeing that consumer desire for transparency, evolve and change?
There's basics of consumer transparency, and they're straightforward. And these have been in place for as long as food labeling has been in place. And for us, if we are in the business of selling groceries, which we are more and more, it's fairly straightforward. We look at uh, what's on those packages, and we replicate that. Now we're at the mercy of the huge food corporations, the manufacturers, the supermarkets, to make sure that's accurate, um, and B, it's clear. But we can, match exactly what that packet would say in the store, and make sure that our customers have it on hand. The challenge we have is also balancing that against the interface. Most people now use our product, and really most people shop for food if they're doing it online in the e-commerce space. They're doing it on a phone, and space is an absolute premium. So we have to find out correct ways, and leverage good design and technology to make sure that that data is in the right place at the right time for those customers. Where I don't have the answer is where there's so many competing pieces of necessary information and food that relate to food transparency. And yeah, where we work well, and where I think the industry should move is really to look at what app developers do, and look at quite how clear apps are, and quite how consistent apps are in providing exactly the information people need, knowing full well that the tech that backs up that app, the settings that may back up that app, are buried underneath and people can access them when they can. But the reality is that we're running out of space on food labels, and we're running out of space on websites to provide everything. And so we do need sort of genuine innovation, in that space, to make sure that we can serve the customers well. So yeah, we've got the answer when it comes to basics, and pre-packed foods. When it comes to restaurant foods and quite how the customer interacts with it going forward, I think watch this space really.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, so, looking ahead, what proactive measures do you think companies like JustEatTakeaway.com really need to adopt to stay ahead of evolving food safety risks in the e-commerce space specifically?
I may sound at this point like a broken record when I mention AI again, but AI risk scanning and uh, the use of any sort of generative AI or predictive AI to tell us exactly what might be coming is is absolutely necessary. We've got huge tech stacks in companies like mine, and we should leverage that. The good news in this space is that everyone in tech is so excited about AI, and they're looking for use cases. And I think in the food safety space, uh, we have a perfect use case. We've got tons of different data points, be it about food poisoning cases, be it about allergen incidents, or even tons of regulators that each publish slightly nuanced and slightly different pieces of legislation. That mixed data set is perfect for AI risk scanning, and it's so much better and cheaper, to be honest, than employing a bunch of people to look through reams and reams of legislation. Not that we want to design out humans entirely, of course not. We just need to deal with the bulk of information that's coming in the correct possible way. So AI risk scanning is important for that. Collaboration is also important. I think anyone in a similar position to mine in any food business would say the same, but we shouldn't be competing in food safety, and we shouldn't work in silos. And we still do. We're better than some other support functions or compliance functions, but more often than not, I would say we still have completely dedicated teams looking at exactly the same pieces of legislation or exactly the same pieces of guidance and interpreting it in very different ways. AI works the way that the cloud works, the way that various different things operate is by pooling and networking that resource, and we should do that in a human capacity as well. There is really no need, no reason why you know 5 different food apps should have 5 different systems for controlling risk, and there's no reason why 5 different supermarkets should have 5 different reasons. So we're doing better at that. We're getting better at that as an industry, but I think far more collaboration. Um, and just open space and open resource is the way forward.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. So I kind of want to end on a segment that we've been doing recently, which is about food industry predictions for 2025. So I'd love to get your take on, what you think are going to be the main changes, evolutions of the industry, and what are your predictions for 2025?
For the past 5 years, I would say in the food industry, certainly when it comes to quick service restaurants and food delivery, is packaging, and we have no clear direction from intra-government organizations, for example, on where we should go with packaging. There are some, I would say, edge cases where we have, um, the EU taking action against single-use plastics, or in the UK where they take action against the use of, I don't know, straws, for example. But they're fringe cases, and they're very much a reaction to something that may be happening in that area. I think what we'll see in 2025 is a continuation and really a leap forward in the technology of packaging and the technology of sustainable packaging. And I think it will come from industry. It typically always does. Most of the big leaps forward that we've seen recently, through the use of recycled materials, through the use of plant-based polymers, they've all been industry led. And I think we'll see another one coming. And that's where I think we're going to see the biggest change from this point in 2026 to right now. We'll see but big food companies make big moves on packaging. We've got to balance that, of course, with the political changes that may be happening, certainly in the US, and whether there's a slightly diminished focus on sustainability as an outcome. But the reality is that the sustainable routes for packaging are becoming economic, and that's going to outspeak anything really, and make it a common sense move. So yeah, I think the trend in food is not about food, it's about what wraps it, and we will see significant changes in packaging of big FMCG products in the next year. So and I hope that's well received, and I hope it's a good thing.
Yeah, no, that's very insightful. Thanks so much. Just to close us out here, anything we didn't get a chance to talk about that you'd like to share? Any final thoughts with our audience?
What the future of the food industry should look like, certainly for packaged foods. I've already talked about the packaging element itself, but when it comes to the label and when it comes to the information that's on it, I would really just double down on taking a lead from the tech world, taking a look at how apps do this, and just using and leveraging cheap, affordable technology, things like QR code, so that we've got a genuine chance to make sure that we can trace absolutely everything that goes into food using all of these huge pieces of technology, from blockchain through AI through QR codes, and making it as user friendly as possible. And I think if there is one thing I would like to see in 5 years, or maybe a bit longer, it would be a fundamental step change in how packaging works, how labeling works, and making sure that customers have complete trust in what they see, and that they have a completely simple interface for seeing it. But no, that's where I'd like things to go. But that's pretty much every message that I can give today.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing your insights with us, Stephen. It's been really informative, and we really appreciate it. And thanks for joining.
Thank you.
And thanks to our audience as well. We'll see you on another episode of Food Tech Talk. Thank you for joining us for another bite-sized nugget of Food Tech Talk, supply chain insights from farm to fork. Make sure to subscribe. And if you love the podcast, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, YouTube Music, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. To learn more about Trustwell and request your free demo of our technology platform that connects food formulation, products, nutrition analysis, and compliant labeling with traceability, recall readiness, and supply chain transparency, please visit us at www.trustwell.com and click Get Started, or click the link in the show notes to learn more. Thanks for listening.